Today we're in Wisconsin. We are going to host a dialogue across geographic divides. And so we're going to learn about rural Wisconsin as well as urban Wisconsin, and then put them together and talk about the whole state and how we work for the common good in this whole state. So let's bring on our guests, please.
I'm Bob Bizat. I live in Burlington, Wisconsin now, which is in southeastern Wisconsin. I just recently moved here from Racine area. And I've worked with many different organizations on different social justice issues.
Great, Bob. Glad you're here. Jan?
Jan Dvorak from West Central Wisconsin, which is very near Eau Claire, La Crosse, and Winona, Minnesota. I'm an alum from Leadership Wisconsin.
All right, fabulous. Reverend Christine Fahey.
Hi, I'm a pastor in the La Crosse Area Synod in the ELCA, and I have worked as a settled pastor in a congregation for many years in La Crosse. And then since then, I've been working as an interim pastor, so I move around a lot. So I get to move. I've lived in and served at congregations in the Viroqua area, Mindoro, Lewis Valley for 3 years, Mauston, Wisconsin, which is going down towards Madison, and Adams, which is also sort of eastern Wisconsin going down to Madison. And so I've gotten kind of a pretty good picture of small towns and medium-sized cities.
Great. Well, we're so glad you're with us. And I know everybody's digging out their map to figure out exactly where this is in Wisconsin. So we'll have a chance to fill in. Okay. Brother Steve.
Good morning. My name is Steve Harrell. I'm a religious brother of St. Norbert Abbey in De Pere, Wisconsin, which is about, I say it's in the metropolitan area of Green Bay. So, although De Pere is only about 22,000 people, our Green Bay metro area is probably about 175, 180,000. Hence, I'm in the urban-suburban group for this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ramiah Whiteside, and I'm born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Big time urban metropolitan background. I come to you today. I'm a coordinator for Expo, which is Ex-Prisoners Organizing, and Wisdom, which has various affiliates all around the state of Wisconsin. So I bring you my experience from the urban area, and also my experience from due to my past incarceration. I've been in rural Wisconsin, urban Wisconsin, kind of a little bit of everywhere. So hopefully I can contribute to many of our commonalities. So we're not as far apart as people would think. So glad to be here.
All right. Ramiah, thank you so much. Pastor Marilyn.
All right. Marilyn Miller. I serve as pastor of the Lutheran Church of the Reformation, located on the north side of Milwaukee. I've been there about a dozen years, and I also serve as president of an organization called MICA, Milwaukee Inner City Congregations Allied for Hope.
Ooh, fabulous. Glad you're here. Rabbi Bonnie Margulis.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Bonnie Margulis. I'm the executive director of Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice. We're an interfaith education and advocacy organization. We're based in Madison, but we're a statewide organization. So we work on issues rural, suburban, and urban around the state.
Super. That's going to be a great conversation. Okay. Last but not least, Darnisha.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Darnisha Garbati, and I am the president of the Burlington Coalition for Dismantling Racism. I currently live in Burlington, Wisconsin, which is a predominantly white town and city. I grew up, however, in Milwaukee, and I am originally from Chicago. So I bring to the conversation, as Ramiah said, both the urban and suburban experience. Thank you.
Oh, fabulous, Darnisha. Okay, so what's evident already is that this theoretical divide that we've created doesn't really exist, but we'll do the best we can to work with our model of having some rural talk, having some urban talk, and then putting this all together to talk across the similarities and differences, okay? So with that, I'm going to ask our tech folks in the background to whisk away my urban folks so that they can be backstage while us rural, I can't claim I'm rural, but so rural folks can have a conversation together. I'm looking forward to this. Okay, great. Well, welcome to rural folks. And this got started because last year in 2019, Network, our organization, did a series of rural roundtables around the country. And one of the things we realized is most of us are city folk, and we really don't know about what does it mean to live in the rural parts of our nation. And so I'm curious if we could just take some time and talk about what's rural Wisconsin like, what's your place in Wisconsin like, and one of my favorite questions is, what does city folk get wrong about living in the country? And what do you like about it? Could you just let's just get started. I'll open it up, and anyone who feels called to begin, let's just hop in. Okay, Jan, you want to get started?
Sure. I live in Arcadia. It's a little city of about 3,000, but it is the international headquarters for Ashley Furniture. We also have Pilgrim's Pride. We have many farmers in our area, large CAFO farmers, as well as organic, smaller farmers. And the vast majority of people who work here live elsewhere. We are a reverse bedroom community because we are 3,000. There isn't housing for many people. There is also white flight. So people who may have owned homes here are selling them, and they're becoming rental properties.
Wow, that's really surprising.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that piece. Christine, do you want to hop in on this?
Sure. Well, I've lived in a number of different places and been pastors in the rural part of Wisconsin, western Wisconsin, and down towards Madison. And I think that there's a really big variety. So down by Viroqua at Bethel Lutheran Church, which is a really small church, there were some people that were there that were very with it and aware of things. And so one of them was a retired school teacher, and she would be always bringing me literature, and we'd have coffee, and we'd talk about things that we're talking about today. The congregation down there is almost all Norwegian descent and possibly a little German, but it's very Norwegian there as far as settlement, at least out in the country, because they were the farmers that were always there and settled there probably 100 years ago. And then, let's see, then I've been in La Crosse, where I live, and La Crosse is not a big city, but it's not that small either. It's enough so that we have.
You do that reverse commute that Jan's talking about, where people come, where you go from a city, a town, out to the country to pastor. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay, that's great. Well, let's weave in Darnisha. Darnisha, do you want to talk a little bit about where you are?
Absolutely. Thank you. So as I said earlier, I am in Burlington, Wisconsin. Burlington is a rural area, which I absolutely love for certain reasons. I like the small town feel. I was always a city girl, being born in Chicago and raised between Chicago and Milwaukee. Lots of traffic, lots of people. Burlington has much more of an intimate feel, which I never thought I would like, but I absolutely love it. The scenery is just beautiful. I like the quietness and the peacefulness as far as the environment is concerned. In the same token, some of the issues I've experienced here, being a Black woman, and some may refer to me as being a double minority, I have experienced quite a bit of a lack of diversity I've learned that Burlington is years behind as far as racial justice and racial awareness and consciousness is concerned. People of color aren't really accepted here by quite a few of the people. There's a lot of blatant bigotry and racism within the schools, within the church, within the community, and within the businesses, even, with the work that I do in Burlington.
Wow.
So those are some of the things that really concerns me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's both a lovely place to be, but a painful place to be, it sounds like, for you. And
very much so.
Community. Yeah. Wow. Okay, Robert.
I didn't hear what you said. Oh,
that's okay. I was just going to move up to Bob and then we can go to the conversation about the various experiences.
okay.
Yes, I live in Burlington now. I've just been here a few months and haven't met Darnisha, but I'll make sure I do that in the next few days. I moved here from the Racine area, which is, and there's a village called Mount Pleasant, which really spans the whole spectrum of people. On the East End, it's very urban and in many cases a very poor community. In the central part of the village, it's very suburban. And in the western part of the village, which is a pretty substantial size, it's rural. And I served as city administrator or village administrator back in the 80s in this community. And really, I didn't find that much difference between people. And I've also worked as a management consultant with about 300 communities around the country, from big cities to small urban areas and rural areas. And I just find that people, in many ways, want the same thing. They want a good place to live for themselves, a good place to live, work, and raise a family. And to do that, they need access. They need good jobs that have reasonable benefits. They need a safe place to live, and they need health care. And that really is across the country. So I know we're talking about divides, but truly I've worked with thousands of people in 300 communities around the country. When you get down to it, they're all pretty much the same. They want what's good for themselves and their family.
Mhm.
All right. I see heads nodding at that. the great unifying theme here. But as you mentioned, some of the issues that you raised, Bob, is that, issues of what we encountered was food access, sometimes getting access to grocery stores, fresh fruits, that kind of thing, and healthcare are two of the challenges, I think, in communication. I'm really glad we're all able to do this online to connect. So I'm curious, how are you? You're in different places. So how are you experiencing those issues of, say, food, grocery stores, or healthcare, or education? Anything that it may be a little bit different between your experience and the city experience?
Well, I'll start, I guess, just in the Racine, Kenosha area. We started a group called the Racine Urban Garden Network about 10 years ago, 8 years ago maybe, and we've developed about a dozen gardens in some of the poorest neighborhoods in the community. We also work with the farmers in Racine and Kenosha County, and also out to Walworth County, to connect them up with the food stores to get more healthy food, connect them up with restaurants.
Cool.
So we created a group called SEED, Sustainable Edible Economic Development. And it's made an impact. It hasn't changed everything, but healthy food is a very important part of what people need.
Amen. Amen. So how about, okay, but that was more your urban work, right, Bob? Or,
Yes.
Okay.
But it worked. It did work with the farmers in the area, and still does. And so it's really brought people together.
That's cool. You're our wrap up. You're our wrap up. So now what we want to do is talk about what's going on in the rural communities, and maybe we need to get Darnisha and Christine and Jan in this to talk about that lived experience.
With COVID, there has been a great deal
Absolutely.
of food insecurity, people
Oh.
without jobs. And so food resources have been given out through the schools and through the churches. But I think it was a real eye-opener for people who are assisting in those areas to see exactly how tough it is for families who do not have the money even for food. As far as grocery stores are concerned, you know, people have to drive a distance if they want to go to, let's say, a Walmart but there are Dollar Generals, Family Dollars that are available for people. Not necessarily the best food that might be available. There are Quick Trips, which are a big organization in the La Crosse and actually tri-state area, Iowa, Illinois, four states, Wisconsin and Minnesota. And I know Paul Service, who's one of the district managers, has made a great effort to get healthy foods into the Quick Trip so people have access. Mm-hmm. And I think that really helps a rural area.
That's great. That's great. Darnisha, I see your head nodding. Do you want to add to this what your experience is?
Absolutely. I just want to echo what Jan said, you know, about living in a rural area. So we also have Walmart and we have Pick and Save and all these and things like that. However, they're in the city and I live in the town, more of a country area. And so there's no public transportation here in Burlington. And so if you don't have a vehicle, it's hard for you to have access to food. There's 2 gas stations near my home, but the prices are so expensive and they're very small. And so your options are very limited. And in addition to that, with me having, you know, Black children who have experienced racism within the school district, my husband and I decided after 4 years to transfer them to the Kenosha Unified School District. In the same token, we lose access to, you know, getting breakfast and lunch for my children from school unless I want to drive an hour and 10 minutes every day to go and pick up their breakfast and lunch because we're living in the Burlington area school district, but we no longer are a part of this school district because of the racism. And so, yeah, those are some of the issues with living in a predominantly white suburban rural area.
So it may be beautiful, it may be quiet, but there's problems. I hear.
Absolutely.
Well, okay, we only have like 1 more minute. I'm curious for our part, and then we'll have more after that. So, Racine, can you talk a little bit, because you've seen several, can you touch on maybe a little bit on the healthcare issues?
Oh, well, I was thinking about food too.
Oh, then go for food. Go for food. Don't mind.
Yeah, that was really an issue. Being, you know, just across race in the various towns that I've served in and country areas, and so I think that a lot of the ministry that the congregations did was feeding, you know, the hungry because just they have issues of not being able to get to a store because they might not have a vehicle, or you know, and the grocery store is being kind of far away, you know, and not having public transportation because in small towns and rural towns you don't have that. So that was things.
Okay.
And what was the other that you asked me about?
Oh, I was just going to touch on healthcare, but that's fine. We can do it later. That's fine. We're good. We're good. Okay, so because time is flying, we need to swap you out and get our city folk in and hear about the difference with urban dwellers and not our commuters. So let's do that. Okay, so let's just open it up. You heard some of the rural folks talking about some of the challenges of transportation, housing, food, racial discrimination. Whoa. I was really touched by it and kind of surprised by that. So I'm curious, what is the city experience? And let's just each of us get a word in about your city experience, and then we'll just have the conversation. So anyone could start, but how did that resonate, or how is it different from your experience?
Well, I'd say it's not very different at all, actually. I mean, some of the specific details of how these issues play out are different between rural areas and urban areas, but the same issues apply: lack of public transportation, lack of affordable housing, food deserts, lack of access to healthcare. I live in Madison, which is our state capital. I think it's the second largest city, although it's not a particularly large city. I'm sorry, I'm from New York. Madison's not a big city. Um, um, it's a pretty small city. But Madison regularly meets, gets on the lists of the top 10 best places to live in the country, unless you're Black. And it's actually pretty much ranks as number 1 or number 2 of the worst places to live if you're Black. I definitely hear it that there's a lot of racism in the smaller towns where African Americans are a very tiny minority. But in Madison, in Milwaukee has the largest African American population in the state. Racism is sadly rampant here as well. So I really didn't hear a whole lot that was hugely different between the issues of people living in rural Wisconsin and people living in the cities.
Wow.
Yeah. So I would agree with Rabbi Bonnie. And I would also add one of the things that we've been working on in Micah, we have an organization that we're partnered with called Coalition on Lead Emergency. And that's an environmental issue. And the lead poisoning of young children in the city of Milwaukee because of the old housing and the paint chips and things that fall into the dirt. And I understand from what I've heard that this is a Wisconsin issue. So all the places that have this old housing and it hasn't been addressing these lead pipes, that lead is taken right into these homes. That's another issue that a lot of us are facing as well.
Wow. We made a stop in Michigan, in Flint, Michigan, and heard about their lead pipe issue, but I didn't realize this. Wow.
Yes.
Okay, important.
I think there's a great value with going second. You get to listen. You get to listen first. But as I'll also reiterate, that there's not much difference when you factor in the systemic issues. So we do have racism, we have discrimination, we have certain biases. With my experience with being, ironically, my incarceration was a sort of blessing. Don't let my wife hear that. But it was because I was able to be around people I normally wouldn't be around. And I also grew up in the foster care system. So I've lived in the urban area, grew up in that area. I grew up in the suburban area. So I had a good mix or meld of both realities. And what I've discovered, just like in retrospect, using my own experiences, is including the COVID reality now, certain things hit us economically and socially in similar ways. So I've met rural people or suburban people and urban people who I was born into, and we have some of the very same challenges. What filter that goes through is what separates us. So my interest is acknowledging that a hungry child in rural Wisconsin or rural Iowa or rural anywhere is the same as a hungry child in urban Milwaukee or Chicago or what have you. So if we have systemic problems and issues or challenges in upper New York, they're the same as the challenges down in Chicago or Milwaukee. So some of our challenges as people is what brings me to these different forums, because I've met so many people on the inside And I've been blessed to meet people on the outside within the community. And what binds us together, being a faith-based group, is our faith and our love for humanity and our empathy for each other. So when I see the different narratives being hijacked by different pundits, which continue to divide us, I have a visceral reaction, because I know that rural farmer genuinely cares about his or her family just as much as I care about mine. So it's how we communicate that I love my family and my area, and I know you love yours. So let's get rid of the divisiveness and these other different opportunists who pit us against each other. And guess what? They're laughing all the way to prosperity and Cadillac healthcare, so on and so forth.
Amen. 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 I'm totally with you. Totally. Okay. After that enthusiastic response, Steve, you want to get in here and talk about up in your area in Green Bay, and then we'll just have a conversation.
Sure. So, good morning again, everyone. As I mentioned, I'm from De Pere, a city of 20,000 within the metro area of Green Bay of about, 225,000. A couple of things I would like to share. So I work part-time for an organization called Bay Area Community Council, which was established about 30 years ago as a think tank on quality of life issues facing Brown County, Wisconsin. And in 2020, we had a number of listening sessions with stakeholding groups in our community. And some of the questions that we asked these stakeholders was, what are some of the greatest challenges facing Brown County, Greater Green Bay? And two of the things that came up probably the most often were the inability to leverage our growing diversity and growing multiculturalism in our community, and a qualified workforce which is too small to support growing sectors of our economy. And so, I throw that out there as a couple of challenges facing our local community. And I would also like to throw out a statistic that I've heard from a number of sources, including our United Way and people in our Housing and Homeless Coalition, which point out that our community lacks 10,000 units of affordable or adequate workforce housing. And that kind of piggybacks.
How many? 10,000?
10,000, lacks 10,000 units, yeah. And which piggybacks to that other issue that our stakeholders mentioned when our Bay Area Community Council held the listening sessions about somewhat related to, do we have the infrastructure to support growing economic opportunities?
Right.
And, we do have, we talk about the, people from the city moving out, driving into the rural areas to work. We have reversed, I think it was one of the other speakers from the rural side spoke about a number of the rural folks driving into the city. And so I see a lot of that in Greater Green Bay, where people like the bucolic nature of, living in the country. And so, they'll drive in from smaller towns in Oconto County or Kewaunee County to work in Green Bay where the jobs are.
Wow, interesting. And Darnesha was talking about it for her kids' schooling.
Yeah,
that's a piece to avoid the racism. Whoa. Okay. Now I need to seed this conversation some way with healthcare, because that's another issue that is big for us at Network, and it's really important that people have access. So I'm curious. You're talking about how I hear housing, that there's some food insecurity, food deserts. But I'm curious, is in the cities, is there fairly easy access to healthcare, or are there still roadblocks in the urban setting?
So the biggest roadblock is really statewide, because Wisconsin is one of only 14 states which did not take the Medicaid expansion money from the Affordable Care Act. So hundreds of thousands of Wisconsinites who could have had access to health care, to health insurance, don't have that because we didn't take the federal funding. And we're losing hundreds of millions of dollars every year because of it, and people are frankly losing their lives because of it. And COVID really has shown the vast disparities between racial groups in Wisconsin in terms of access to health care, but also so many other ways. The African American, Latinx, and Native communities have been disproportionately hit by the virus. They've been disproportionately hit by losing their jobs because so many of the job sectors that have been hit by the economic fallout from the pandemic are sectors that are heavily African American and Latinx workers and low wage workers and undocumented workers. And so the domino effect down the line from lack of access to healthcare to losing their jobs to not having stable housing to not having food security, not having access to unemployment insurance, particularly for the undocumented who are eligible for no benefits at all. So all of these things are intertwined and they all snowball. And a lot of the systemic issues across the state, starting with healthcare, but really all down the line, all can be laid at the feet of our state legislature, which is the least active, supposedly full-time legislature in the country. They have not passed a single piece of legislation in 182 days.
Holy moly, that's sort of like the U.S. Senate, but we won't go there. Okay. The challenge, I mean, this intersecting challenge must be making it hugely difficult in the cities, in the urban setting right now for people just to even survive. Is that your experience?
Yeah, very much so. And the stress level is so high for some people, and it exacerbates itself in things like a very heightened domestic violence situation. We have the crime rates of, I hate to say it, but young people killing young people is just going up. And every day we hear about a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, a 20-year-old that's lost their life because they don't have the tools to be in relationship together. And what they've been taught is that guns will take care of it. And so, so it's a great deal of stress in our communities, and it manifests itself in so many ways. So there's a lot of challenges.
Well,
I think one of the I guess biggest, and I think Darnisha touched on it when she shared, one of the biggest challenges between the rural area and healthcare is, well, in rural, if you don't have broadband, that's an issue for telemeds or those things. And then in the urban area, because it's the demographic is more congested, you have clinics, you have emergency rooms. So the access is within walking distance to get to some clinic. You're not going to walk to any clinic in the rural area. You're not even going to walk to the gas station. Your neighbor might be 5 miles away. So that's a particular unique challenges between urban areas and maybe the rural areas. But then the flip side to that is in the urban areas, because it's so congested, and the clinic, they're all, especially during COVID, there's a lot more people rolling through those filters. So it's congested, unbelievably so. So you have to have all these things if the system was working up to speed on a normal day, it would still be so much traffic. Well, we're far beyond normal now.
Amen.
So it's even so in the rural areas that I've seen, you have some people who they go without because a lot of them don't have transportation. So that's one of the differences I saw as far as access to healthcare. And one more thing, and I'll end. I can tell you who don't have an issue with healthcare, the people we elect. I'm just saying.
Let's make it perfectly clear. All right, now let's bring back our rural folks, and then we can talk together because we've already started that process. Okay, welcome back. So, what I'm hearing is that some of the topics of challenges may be the same, but the way they play out are different. I hear that housing's a challenge both in rural and urban setting, transportation,
Yes.
discrimination, and healthcare. I mean, it's all a challenge. Am I understanding it correctly? Or what am I missing?
Yes.
So to answer Ramaya, in terms of rural healthcare, we did have a hospital and a nursing home, and that closed, but we do have a clinic here that is accessible. And some of the big industries have their own healthcare facilities available to them. The downside of that is if a person leaves a particular job, they lose those benefits. I know, for example, a woman who works a night shift in one of the major industries and works 12-hour shifts. And it's not just 3 or 4 days a week, but it might be 5 or 6 days. And it wreaks havoc on her family. She has applied to shift to a day shift, and that has not been granted, even though she's been there for, I think, 13 years. So there are difficulties with healthcare being tied to a person's job and how it impacts his or her family.
Wow. It also seems like work requirements seem problematic. 12-hour shifts?
Absolutely. But I think the reason this particular individual is held to that particular job is because she is responsible. She will show up. She will do what's required of her. And because she needs the health care for her and her family, she's tied.
Yeah, I hear it. Yeah. Wow. So what are some of the urban folks? We got to listen to the rural folks first. So I'm curious, did the rural folks hear things that you wanted to lift up that are also true or different in your environment?
There is a great similarity between the rural and urban areas as far as the types of issues that are faced, and there are calls for sort of different responses based on the community. But I think a lot of it just still goes back, which we haven't talked about, are jobs, and good jobs that pay well and have reasonable benefits. Those things have very much disappeared, whether it's urban or rural areas, and we need to address that both at the state and national level. And that then results in all these other kinds of problems as far as I'm concerned. And if you don't have the money to pay for, even if you have access to health care, if you don't have benefits that are paid for, you can't afford it. The biggest cause of bankruptcy for people in this country is medical bills. And so those things just go on. And I think we need to really address the job situation in this country. We've had a lot of really cheap, poor jobs come to our area with Amazon, where people work 40, 50 hours and they get everything they do timed to the second, and they don't get paid much. And that's just one example of what's going on.
Wow. Darnese? Go ahead.
The other difficulty is the discrepancy between full-time people with benefits and contract workers. And many of the jobs are offered as contract to hire. And after you reach that maximum number of days at a particular job, the job ends and you are not hired. And so you continue without benefits and you look for another job. That may not necessarily be true for all of rural Wisconsin, but I know it is for other people that I know living in other parts of the country as well, and that is concerning.
Absolutely. And Darnisha, do you want to jump in on this and what your experience is? I was really touched at the end of our rural conversation. You were talking about commuting all the way into Kenosha for your kids. So what is this experience like for you?
Absolutely. It has been very challenging to say the least. And to be honest, I mean, my husband and I are blessed and fortunate enough to be able to do that. But I feel terrible for people who aren't able to do those kinds of things. And in addition, Aurora is the only healthcare entity here in Burlington as far as getting your physical healthcare needs met. There's a lot of private practices as far as mental health is concerned. But even as a person of color, you don't see any therapists or counselors who look like you or who
Mhm.
have been through similar experiences as you have as far as racism is concerned. And so oftentimes, the trauma, the traumatic impact from the racism, it goes untreated, because you don't have that. And you would have to drive to Kenosha or Racine or Milwaukee to see a provider that looks like you. And
Wow.
then with our insurance, we're not allowed to go to Aurora. We have to go to Freighter. Our insurance won't pay at all if we go to Aurora. And so we have to commute at least 40 minutes just for routine office visits and things of that nature. Urgent care issues too. We're only allowed to go to Aurora if there's an emergency, and
Wow.
then in addition to those issues, healthcare disparities are at significant highs in predominantly
Wow.
white areas, and
Yeah.
it's there's a lack of affordable housing, a lot of housing discrimination here. People have been turned away from houses. And we lack the community organizations here in Burlington to stand up and step in and speak up for people of color in these areas dealing with these issues.
Amen. Well, I have to tell you, get Bob in alliance. You two get together. You'll make a change in Burlington, I can tell you. All right. Chris, you wanted in.
Okay,
There we
so Darnisha just said some things that also seem to be true in rural areas. When I think about all of the rural areas that I've served, transportation is huge. Not everybody, you have to drive. In some cases, you have to drive really far to get to a city, and like the size of La Crosse. And as far as healthcare, there are a lot of people who just don't, they're independent farmers and they don't necessarily have healthcare. And so I'm thinking about all of the different congregations where, the nurses that are in the congregation will just come forward and they'll say, okay, we're going to have an immunization clinic and everybody can get free flu shots and things like that. And people would call on them a lot. So there is that, not everyone having healthcare, even in rural areas too, I think. And
Yeah.
so that struck me.
That's important because we learned that one of the challenges for farmers getting healthcare, if they don't have somebody working in town that has it as a benefit, that having monthly payments is very difficult for a farmer because they get revenue a couple times a year with the harvest. So it was something that I had never thought of.
Yeah.
In
Okay.
northeastern Wisconsin, in Metro Green Bay, we are blessed to have, I would say, an adequate number of healthcare facilities. But so I mean, we have the locations and they're well equipped. But as I think others would reiterate, it's a question of access and everybody, having the resources to access them. I would say also, so Medical College of Wisconsin, which is a major health provider in the Milwaukee area, actually started a branch medical college on the campus of my alma mater, St. Norbert College, in order that the shortage of healthcare workers in rural Wisconsin can be met.
Whoa.
And I know that Marshfield Clinic, which is more in the central part of the state, has also done great initiatives in branching out for healthcare training for professionals in the underserved rural parts of the state. So that's kind of the scene here. Most recently, in the last 2-3 weeks, we've been a national news story in northeastern Wisconsin, i.e. Brown County, as having one of the highest COVID infection rates in the country.
Yeah.
And there were some people have asked, well, why is it so high in, Green Bay and in Brown County? One theory is that any initiatives that the governor and the executive branch of state government has tried to take has been shot down by the legislature or by the courts. And now, to the extent that, most recently the governor had implemented a requirement that bars and restaurants must be limited to 25% of their serving capacity. The legislature, as one of the speakers said earlier, has not been passing a lot of has not been passing a lot of laws this year, and they refuse. And this is they refuse to come back together to do anything about this. But there was the Tavern League and I guess I would call it a right of center legal association in Wisconsin took the governor's order to court. And just last week, a judge in one of the counties threw out the 25% ceiling for bars and restaurants. And so the governor is almost gun shy, I would say, due to how the legislature and the Wisconsin Supreme Court have tied his hands in trying to meet some of these COVID challenges head on.
Okay, Steve. When we cannot work together to work for the common good and just try to keep people healthy, and everybody has a right to be sick, but then to use all these resources, it drives me crazy. Sorry. We the people forming a more perfect union, not getting everybody sick. But I got to wrap this up because we only have 5 minutes left. I can't believe this hour has gone so fast. Oh my Lord. So, what I'm going to ask is everybody think of a message that you want to leave our viewers with about your community. What's the message from your community that you want to leave? And we'll just go popcorn style so that whoever wants to do it can leap in, because some people lead I noticed a couple of people writing a little something. So don't.
I can go.
Okay, go.
Kind of part of my background is I spent 25 years waiting or praying for this opportunity. So I better have something prepared. I think one of the like with Unlock the Vote efforts.
Love it.
That's not just for the urban areas. We have voting issues in rural America too. So what I would say to my urban common folks and comrades is, it is very important to get involved in our democracy. So right now we're at a standstill with our national politics and local politics. So take that right very seriously. It is a right. It's a constitutional right. Right now, I can't because of my past or whatever, but one day soon I will be able to vote again. So all of these issues that are near and dear to us, if you don't exercise your voice, that means you're silent. That means the powers that be and those who do have Cadillac healthcare, and they really don't have the issues that we have down here at Ground Zero, they're going to continue to self-perpetuate a system that directly impacts us. And we're the ones having these nuns on the bus panels and these webinars and these different trainings, and they're the ones who can't even come together to talk. So vote locally, vote down ballot. It does whatever your propensity is or whatever your platform is, exercise your right to vote. And I don't care where you live.
Amen. And we were at a site visit in Iowa where just a sec, Marilyn. We were at a site visit in Iowa where the woman had a sign that said, "Bad politicians are elected by good people who don't vote." So you want to get rid of bad politicians? Vote. Okay, Marilyn, sorry to interrupt.
I was just going to say what I would let people know is don't believe the hype A lot of lies are told about all of our
That's good.
communities. And unless you do your own investigation, you need to get out of your bubbles. When COVID is past, urban people need to get out to the country, and the people in the country and the rural areas need to come to the city. We need to meet each other. We used to do that. We traveled when I was in the youth choir all over the country. And most of the places we went to were the rural areas and the towns. And we got to know a lot of people. And that shaped my worldview. And so the narrative, as Ramaya was saying earlier, they're manipulating the narrative. And if you believe what you see on the TV, you're being manipulated. And I want to just tell you that there's good people everywhere.
All right. Yay, Marilyn.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
If I could just build on what Ramaya was saying about
please.
voting, absolutely. Everybody needs to get out to vote. But voting is just the first step. So after you voted and after we have hopefully new folks in office, we need to hold them accountable to all of these issues that we've talked about today and so much more. So voting is the first step. It's not the end of the line of being engaged in what's happening in our state and in our country. So vote, and then as soon as people get into office, make an appointment, meet with them, talk with them, tell them these are the things I care about. These are the things that I want you to do. Whether you voted for that person or voted for their opponent, it doesn't matter. You voted, and they know that you voted, so they want to hear what you have to say. And they're your elected representative, whether you voted for them or not. So make sure they represent you. And the only way to do that is by telling them what it is that you care about and that you want them to do.
Excellent. Good point. I loved it. Next, who wants to go?
Can I just add something?
Sure, Bob.
Yeah, we've talked about a lot of negative things, which there certainly are, but there's also lots of good things going on every day, and we didn't talk too much about that, what people are doing in their communities, and I just don't want us to get discouraged. There's good things happening, lots of people working at it, and let's keep doing it as best we can.
Amen. Jan.
In tandem with that, I think it's important to have a macro view of the world, but also to have the micro view and to get to know your neighbors and what the needs are there, and to know that love never fails.
Amen.
I would like to throw in a shout out for Fair Maps. I mentioned that Wisconsin is nationally known for our high COVID rates right now. We're also nationally known for being one of the most gerrymandered states. And there is a strong movement in our Wisconsin to remove the redistricting responsibility from partisan legislators to a nonpartisan appointed commission. And, you know, probably 2/3 of our counties have had resolutions, advisory referendums in support of this. Marquette University's polling shows that 70% of Wisconsinites are in support of legislative district maps being written by nonpartisan entities. The governor has called for it and has put together a task force, but even when the task force comes out with their proposals and perhaps their maps, the legislature can still throw them out because according to Wisconsin law, it's in the hands of the legislature. So we need an entity that's going to ensure that gerrymandering becomes obsolete in Wisconsin.
Oh, all right. Good point. Two more. Christine Darnisha? Christine Darnisha, you're going to get the last word. Okay.
Okay. So my takeaway is that dialoguing is really important, that we are all in the same state, that we have different issues, we have commonalities in issues, especially when you think about food insufficiency and things like that in both rural and cities, and medium-sized cities too. So I think that just being able to remind people that, or not even remind them, but to talk about that with people and put that out there, that there's a lot more we have in common than we don't.
Okay, Darnisha, last word.
I want to echo what Ramaya and so many others said. You know, we must exercise our right to vote. My coalition partnered with the Racine Interfaith Coalition to do some voter engagement. And I had so many young people to tell me that they do not want to vote because they don't have any control over the outcome. And so I need the people of Burlington, I need the people of Wisconsin, period, to exercise their right to vote. Even if you're not voting, you're still contributing to who will end up in office. So thank you.
Mhm.
All right, as my sign says back here, who we elect matters. So vote. We need you. All right, Wisconsin, thank you so much for giving us an introduction to your state, to the diversity, to the challenges. I've heard about food, healthcare, racism, and prejudice that we continue need to break open and end the structural racism. And that whole idea of traveling around, weaving us together, getting to know each other, that I think is something once COVID's over, we can do it in person. But until then, we can at least do it on Zoom. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. You're great.
Thank you.